Hello, everyone. I am so pleased today to have the brilliant Emelie Cajsdotter back on my channel. Now, Emelie and can you believe it, Emelie? It was a year ago we had our last conversation. It's such a how time flies, and I know a lot
Really?
for you and your sanctuary in that time. But we're going to have a really important conversation today, really delving deeper into animal communication, empathic animal communication, and really just how significant this is to everything that's going on in our own lives, in the world today, for those of us that can feel very separated from what's going on in the wider world today, how this can really help. But before we delve into that subject, Emelie, how are you? And can you please introduce yourself and your work to our audience?
Yes, my name is Emelie, and I'm Swedish, and I live in the west coast of Sweden or southwest of Sweden. And since 1995, I run a sanctuary for animals, and it turns out it will probably be a lot more other species than only animals in the future. Not by degrading animals, by saying only animals. And the basis of this sanctuary is not just to rescue animals and then sort of rehabilitate them and send them on. We don't do that. We rehabilitate them, but we don't sell them on. The idea is to try to maintain a place where every individual, regardless of species, have the space to be and express who they are based on their natural needs as a species and as their individual needs as a person. Because in my work, I work with empathic communication with animals. I all the time meet animals that don't perform in a way that we expect them to do. Either it's horses that are not rideable, or that they don't excel in the competition as we hope for them to do, or other things that the animals that don't fulfill our wishes or needs, and that brings the question forth: what rights do we have to expect anything of them, really? And we, seeing it from their perspective, we also ask very many unnatural things of them that we consider normal. And when they then can't deliver what we want, we punish them or sell them or even put them down. And what puts the human being in the position of such power? And in the end, perhaps we are the one really losing and missing out. Because perhaps we can grasp or get what we want, but who do we become in this process? So I live far away in the woods, and it's sort of a cheap and basic kind of life. And that's how it started. That creates space to welcome other individuals to come and live, because it was financially possible. Or I made it financially possible. I guess it's a choice. Because it was so hard to meet these individuals at work, knowing that they would be put down for protesting against something that they really, in my view, had the perfect right to protest against. And what kind of society do we create when we actually put down anyone who doesn't agree? It's very scary. And just because they don't have a voice the way we expect a voice to sound, can we because of that deprive them of all of their rights? There are lots of questions in this, but that's how the sanctuary started, and then over the years it became very big. So it's about 70 horses that lives here.
Wow.
It's about 66 chickens between me and the fox, but it's part of the natural system as well. And then there are dogs and cats and guinea pigs. It's a little flock of guinea pigs. They live in a huge pile of straw because they refuse to move inside, even if we had -27 and I expected them all to be dead because their bodies are tiny. How can they handle -27? I mean, I can't. But they could. They just sat there in their pile of straw and eating away.
You know, we're going to come on to that, because anyone who watched this, I have to stop. I am obsessed with guinea pigs, and I do get it from my mother and my father, because when we were growing up, my mother, we could never find her. She was always in the shed with the guinea pigs. They are pure love. And I love that you say that, because I've got another very good friend that I met through helping her with her horse, who rescues guinea pigs. And what she does is, when one, you know, guinea pigs obviously have to, anyone watching must live in pairs or ideally herds. And so often people get left with one lone guinea pig when the others have died, and she takes them all in. And they live outside in the most amazing area with so much hay and straw and shelter. And they've got a plastic like ponytullin over them.
Yeah,
But
we have in one part of it, so it
yeah,
won't rain on them.
the RSPCA won't let her rehome anything, because they say it's cool living them outside. And her guinea pigs are the healthiest and happiest I've ever seen. So I just wanted to put that in there. But Emelie, when you were doing that introduction, I felt my heart really go, because even though we are talking about animal communication, you really, to me, summed up perfectly the mess that humanity is in right now, and the way you express the empathic animal communication. And I'd like to ask you what that is, because I think we've seen in general as humanity that we've lost the ability to communicate empathically with each others and also with ourselves.
Definitely. I think that is the basis of our separation from anything else living on this planet, and the reason why we can make destructive choices. We can make those choices because we don't feel the effect on the other one. We
Yeah.
can only feel how we feel about that effect. So if I ride a horse and that makes me happy, that's what I feel. I don't feel what the horse actually feels. I feel my own interpretation of the situation. And then I also interpret what I think the other one thinks about it, based on what I know and what my experience is. And as a human being, I think very much emotion-based. And to be emotional and being empathic is not the same thing. And I think this is an important distinction. And why I call it empathic communication is also that because I think we need to bring this subject forth, whether it's in a meeting of animals or with animals or other human beings. It's an inner state of being towards the world that modern society is working against in many ways, actually. So I think we have a kind of animal communication that is based on readings. It's like I read the animal, which again, even if you are very clear-sighted and can probably pick up on a lot of things, not to belittle it, but it's still based on the observer.
Yes.
Skill of the observer. There isn't necessarily an actual meeting point between the communicator, in this case the human, and the animal. It's still based on me as a human being giving myself the right of interpretation, which to me is the whole problem. It also means that I probably put a lot of underlying, perhaps unconscious values that I have. So what I see is it will also be to some extent based on my opinions, which will happen in empathic communication as well, but perhaps at least to a lesser extent. So I think what the difference would be is that in the empathic meeting, the self, the sense and experience of self is expanding, so it can include someone else except me within me. I don't believe that I am the animal. I don't lose myself and my sense of center. That would be a projection.
Yeah.
But it means that for a glimpse of a second before my brain catches up, hopefully I have the chance to experience truly what the other one really feels. not how I feel about the other one, but how the other one truly experienced the situation, which means that for that split second, I mean, it's timeless in a way, but we normally can't hold focus for so long as humans. That I can truly feel what it's like to have hoofs, to be out in this field, or to be stuck in this box, or to be jumping this fence, not based on my opinion, but actually being able to shift the perspective fully. And that means that I feel what the other one feels in me. And that makes it a lot more difficult to harm the other one, because all of a sudden I feel how that feels for the other one. And it no longer gives me any sense of joy. If I ride a horse that is terrified, I would feel that, and I would immediately jump off, because I wouldn't want to harm the other one. We don't wish others ill. I mean, we don't have bad intent, but we're ignorant because we have no idea. We are taught that a horse that is obedient is happy, because such a big animal as a horse would never be obedient unless they wanted to.
Absolutely. So well, yeah. Oh, can we talk about that then? Because we've seen so much you've only got anyone who's on social media of any sort, and of course this is going on social media platforms, will see the level of anger of how people are so, in one respect, Emelie, I think that society now is really encouraged to think about themselves to the exclusion of all others. So now in many areas of the world, it's a crime to upset someone's feelings.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it's right. You know, I grew up with sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. And of course, we do know that words do have energy, that do cover vibration. So I don't agree with that either. So when you see the way society is going, in some respects, you can see why, because we're not pretending that the old days were perfect, because they weren't. But it does raise an interesting issue to me, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, so apologies, but I think it's Umbatu, where it's like, I am you and you are me, the sort of African saying, where you get pleasure when the whole herd, when the whole tribe, when the whole community is okay. And we see this happening a lot in nature, whether it's a pack of animals or a herd of horses, but we've lost that community from the human side of things. Do you see messages that animals can teach us about that, and that they want us to know?
Yes, I think that's very much spot on, that we've lost the sense of community. And when we've lost that, we also have no responsibilities, which is then when you take the concept very far to one side, in that you're not allowed to hurt me. No, you shouldn't hurt me. Actually, you shouldn't want to hurt me. But I also have responsibility for how I receive your words. If we take away that responsibility, it's an imbalance anyway. So I think it comes down to the difference between the self and the ego, where the self is this expansion that constantly is looking for relationships, meeting points, sharing. The self wishes to share. I mean, we know that with small children, where as soon as we can talk, we want to explain what we're experiencing. Or in newborn chickens, if you listen to what they actually say, they just keep talking about everything that they experience. It's cold, it's warm, I found this, I found that. Why do we have the urge to keep telling our stories? And I think it's because the self is looking for that union and that sense of community, while the ego, who is cut off from the experience of the soul. If the self is the merge between the body and soul, the ego has no connection with the soul part, with the eternal part. So the ego is the part of us that is constantly being threatened, constantly dying, and constantly being extinguished. So the ego is fighting for survival, and with whatever it takes. So from the ego's perspective, we base our communities on competition. We accept that some people are poor or starving because that's just the way it is if we want to produce things for the rest of us or whatever, if you say it harshly. The self wouldn't want that because the self would want what you describe. The self cannot feel satisfaction unless there is a sense of, I mean, we can't imagine a life without pain and challenges and struggles, but suffering is something else. I think that the self is not content until we have diminished a level of suffering in a greater community. So we will not be satisfied for as long as we just look for our own success and riches or just fulfilling our own needs. We will never, and we know that we don't find happiness there. We all know it if we would discuss it, but we keep doing it because the ego believes is very short term.
Yes.
And is constantly struggling to not feel the anxiety of dying.
Mm.
So whatever we can fill our void with, we do. And in that moment, we don't consider the suffering of all other species that is giving their lives to fill that void in us.
It's so true. And I suppose it's such an interesting dilemma I've had a lot of discussions, people who've been doing a lot of inner work and also a lot of work about trying to look at the problems facing humanity to me. And I think one of the things is a lot of humans have lost love and respect for humanity.
Yes.
Have the animals lost love and respect for us? Have they got some tips
No,
for
well,
what we
they
can do
have.
about that?
This
Because I just think we all know what it's like. You know, I don't think there's a single person, Emelie, watching this that won't have felt when you're interacting with someone that you can tell doesn't like you or disapproves of you. It's a horrible feeling, isn't it? We've sort of done that at large as a society. So tell us some tips that the animals can give us to deal with this, because they don't feel this in the same way, do they?
No, I mean, you expect when you listen to their stories, which is what I've done for almost 30 years as a full-time, more than a full-time job. And when you come to these insights as a human being, which I'm sure is true for you and many people listening as well, is that we're overpowered with this sense of guilt. It's like perhaps this planet would be better if we just took all the humans away and just let nature heal itself. Some days I can still feel like that.
Yeah.
But I don't hear that from any other species. And that it took me a while to realize that of all the animals that describes serious abuse, actually, and sometimes even ill intent, because we can be sick enough to actually have that, they still don't hate the people who did that to them. Animals that become aggressive, they become aggressive because they need to protect their integrity or their life or the lives of others. It doesn't mean that they hate the one that they attack. We seem to be the only one doing that.
Yeah.
And they don't hate us. They never say that they wish us to disappear from this planet. What they constantly keep saying, though, is that we need to step in. We need to step in and interact with this creation in relationship with other beings or with any other life form. And they wish for us to do that. So they actually, what they keep doing is they keep inviting us. And it's very hard for us, for some reason, to feel welcome.
Yeah.
And some of the horses here described it that in the society that is mainly based on the needs of the ego, we keep defending ourselves and we're in a constant competition with one another, which means that we are constantly judging everyone else. So we believe that everyone else is judging us. And based on that perspective, we wouldn't truly believe that this horse would choose to be with me unless I forced him to. And if you look at that relationship, it's the very basis of what we know of destructive relationships between humans. That one part make the other part helpless through all sorts of abuse and closing off friends and everything we do, so that the other one can't leave us. Because deep down, we don't believe that the other one would choose to stay with us given the choice. And we do that to lots of our domesticated animals. We make them helpless because it's the only way we know to make the relationship last. But it isn't really the only way we know if we would look deeper. But it's what we've been practicing. So it's the techniques we have, and the tack and the gear is based on that, perhaps, and how we keep them. But I think what we need to go into at some stage is that sense of vulnerability, of being accepted for who we are. No one is asking anything else of us, really. But perhaps we don't know how to be that. How do I go to the stable and meet my horse without any other intention than saying, help me, I need to understand this reality. I need to be able to step in, and I have no idea how to do it. I think that's probably what we would need to do. And that would work with any living being. It doesn't have to be the domesticated animals that we know and interact with. It could be a tree.
Yes.
It could be a wild animal. It could be anything living, because they all seem to be sharing the same reality, while we're standing on the sort of threshold and we're not sure. We long for something and we don't know what it is. But would we step down from the privilege we have of our right to interpretation? And what are we risking if I make myself one of many? Because perhaps as a human being, I have some experience genetically or personally of abandonment. And what happens if my survival strategies, if I would lay down my weapons, what would that do? Well, it would create a huge fear and anguish in the part of me that is the ego, for sure.
There's so many important points you've raised here. It's quite incredible, your insight. And for everyone, I will be putting my first 2 interviews with Emelie below, because we do go into in those that Emelie is also an absolutely brilliant author. Your book, All the King's Horse, is just phenomenal. So we'll talk about that at the end. But I think this is why I just want people to understand that you do have books as well, because you're so great at explaining things. And I think this is what you're describing is the crux of where we are at as humanity, and it's very difficult. Everything you're describing to do with animal communication, Emelie, is exactly like the spiritual teachings that, you know, you cannot love another if you don't love yourself. When you're discussing about how abused animals, and this is absolutely my experience because I do a lot of sort of empathic communication with animals as well, is the lack of judgment and blame from animals as a human can make you feel really like, wow, because when you recognize that actually I haven't reached that level of lack of judgment and lack of brain.
No, me neither.
And it's incredible, but it's almost like animals have achieved this state of enlightenment that humans are constantly chasing so desperately for.
Yeah. Yes, and as when you mentioned that the spiritual teachings, what I find sometimes in spiritual teachings based on human experience is that, again, we give ourselves the right of interpretation, basically claiming that humans are the only species that can reach enlightenment.
Yes.
And the more you communicate with other species, you begin to think, what if it actually is the other way around?
Yes.
And they're all doing what they can to support us to take this step because they're already there. And we miss out to such an extent in our judgment of how well developed is your nervous system or your intellect, and that would be a measurement of your empathic spiritual experience of life. We probably I think if you look at the way of seeing the world, if you would to some extent see everything as having a soul, like
Yeah.
a spark of life that is comes from something that is bigger than us and more eternal than us. So we can never fully understand it. We can definitely never measure it. Then some animals or other species have described that when you come to life, when the big mystery, how the materia becomes alive, is when the soul merges with the materia, and that happens with the help of consciousness. And at the same time, consciousness doesn't exist until this merge is happening.
Mm.
And if you would believe that to some extent, that would mean that everything that is alive has eternity in it and has consciousness. Whether we then have a brain or whatever kind of body we have would definitely change our experiences and how we express those experiences. But to say that no other life even knows that it exists, how can we say that?
Mm.
It's very ignorant to say that without even trying to check with the other one. And I often hear when people have to put their animals down and they say, well, they never know that they're dying, don't they? It's like, well, they do.
They do, and they know exactly that you're thinking about having that.
Yes, they know it before you. They understand it in a greater depth than you, most likely, because they have accepted that cycle to an extent that at least I haven't.
Yeah,
So it's
so
some
fascinating.
life forms would be simpler than others. I think
Yeah,
we need to move away from that kind of judgment because it hinders the empathic meeting. Definitely.
yes. When you were talking, it really made me think. I don't know how many people watching this or whether you've seen this film, Emelie, V for Vendetta. And
Yeah, I've seen it years ago.
me,
Many times years
but I
ago.
did watch it again when all the shenanigans of 2020 came out. My friends and I watched it again, and this concept, it's like, oh my goodness. And I recognize myself doing this constantly, of humans putting themselves in a self-imposed prison that doesn't exist. So we think
Yes.
that we haven't
Yes.
got choices. But
Mm.
interestingly, that makes us, you never see an animal in the wild put themselves into a self-imposed prison.
No.
And yet, we humans do that to other animals, often because we think we're making the best decisions for them, or sometimes not, many times not, when you look at factory farming and things like that. But one thing I hear talked a lot about by really brilliant people like Greg Braden is this ability, the separation of humans between the conscious and the subconscious mind, and the fact that humans are supposedly the only animal in the whole of the kingdom that have this ability, if we learn how or remember how, to consciously control, whether you want to call it manifesting, to control a lot of our bodily functions, even the autonomic nervous system. People like Wim Hof have shown that. So can you talk me through, in your experience, are we the only species that can manifest, that can control our physical body and our destiny, so to speak, through our mind?
Well, lots of other species make the conclusion that human beings have more choices. Like we have an extra choice that needs to be made all the time. While they describe that they are who they are. It's like it was actually the guinea pigs describing that for a human being to be able to take in the world, we first have to empty ourselves of ourselves, and then the world can enter. They don't have to do that because they are already full of the world.
Yeah.
There is no element of choice. So it seems like, yes, we can choose, and it makes us very creative because there is this gap. It's not only the mind, it's also the interpretation of the mind. We have an extra layer, if you want to call it something. It seems like that, and it makes sense. But as long as we're separated, this doesn't really add much to us, because this creativity can only be used and bloom in its potential when we become one with everything.
Yeah.
Because only then can the world respond. Before that, it's still only within me. So as a human being, I'm also the only species that can create an illusion. I can lie, I can deceive myself, which is a really interesting part,
Yeah.
which no one else can do. So it seems like if we do like the guinea pigs describe and empty ourselves of ourselves, then it wouldn't be our personal will that would steer our creative powers. It would be something greater coming through us, which makes us co-creators. Like it means that our manifestation would be more instant, but it wouldn't be at the expense of anyone else because we wouldn't be driven by personal gain. So I think we are very immature in this ability. We're teenagers and we've just discovered it. And we want everything for ourselves and for our own experience. And we don't really realize that that experience is just a tiny fraction of what's possible for us to experience if we would step aside
Yeah.
from ourselves and totally give ourselves to the world and let the world live through us. At this point, I think we feel that as a potential loss, that we would lose out on this power. This sense of power still gives us a sense of security.
Yeah.
Hopefully that will change because this security is very false since we are destroying the world around us. It really doesn't make us very safe at all.
And without those relationships, without that sense of belonging, we all know you can have all the money and possessions in the world, but it means nothing. Emelie,
Yeah.
when you're talking there, do you think it's this, I know I'm just talking out loud as the thoughts come in because there's so much that you're saying. But for me, what occurred to me when you were just speaking there is perhaps the animals recognize the potential for the whole planet and everything in on it, around it, when we do learn how to use this skill in the way that it was intended, whatever people's belief systems are in terms of giving us that skill. Perhaps that's why the animals haven't given up on us, because they can see how much better everything will be when we learn how to use this in the correct way.
I really think so. And also, if we choose not to step in and live in a relationship with all other living beings, they also see that as the end of our species because we can't survive by ourselves, eating everything around us. Eventually, there will be an end to that. But that's not the choice they wish for.
Mm.
They really hope that we will be able to fully participate because then that will enhance the life experience for everything else alive, since everything will be in me and outside of me, and with this double mirroring it will enhance the life experience for all of us. So we can really add to this creation, but not by leaving marks and building statues perhaps, but through allowing life to pass through me. And I need to make my ego a little bit more quiet for that to happen.
That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I'm sort of smiling to myself because all the great teachers that so many of us listen to, they're with humans, there's people like Bob Proctor describe it as the consciously competent and the unconsciously competent. So a lot of people have these abilities to manifest anything they want, create what they want, in a positive way, but they don't understand how they do it. They just innately have got the skill to do it. And what makes some of these great teachers is the ones that consciously understand what steps they're doing and changes they're making, so that they can pass this skill on so others can understand it as well. But bit like there's a big difference between being an Olympic athlete yourself and being able to help others train to be the best Olympic athlete.
Yes.
So taking this on to a bit of a level for people, say, you know, I've got my dogs behind me on the sofa, my cat's down here. I know you're surrounded by all sorts of creatures. If someone's sharing their life with an animal, let's talk about a dog or a cat. I know they're very different. What are some of the key things that you think come out time and time again, that these animals who are really reliant on their human parents for their food, their water, their exercise, their company, their chemicals, are there consistent themes that come out that they really want us to know?
Well, there is this. There are some different things. One is lots of these breeds we've been breeding animals to fit our own needs for many generations at this point, which means that they do have needs that is connected to that. I mean, if you are a hunting dog, you're gonna need to really exercise, otherwise you will not be happy, and you can't really change that for anything else. So quite often there is a lack of our ability to fulfill their natural needs that none of us can change. It's like they're born this way. And we tend to project things that we like. I mean, if I like to be inside and it's warm, I want my animals to be warm inside as well, because I tend to give others what I wish for myself, and try to understand, well, again, with the empathic meeting, what does he actually want? It's like when the dogs here bark in the middle of the night and they want to go outside, I always feel bad letting them out because it's cold outside.
Yes.
And I shouldn't. I should feel bad if I force them to stay inside.
Yes.
But because it's more comfortable for me inside. So that's one thing. What do they actually need? And if they are given what they need, it will fill us with a different kind of satisfaction. I think we have a tendency to overprotect animals out of care, but not only out of care. It's also to deal with our own emotions.
Yeah.
If I do this, we overfeed animals because we feel good when we feed them. So we can't really see the outcome of that. Can we build relationships perhaps with less positive and negative reinforcement, and more by just being? Many animals don't really feel the need to perform to such an extent that we believe that they do. Some do, but not everyone. We tend to think that a horse that can't be ridden at all has such a miserable life that it's better that they're put down. We don't really check if that's true. And then we have perhaps another horse that is stuck in the field and would love to take a great risk and gallop fast downhill, and we don't allow them because they would be injured, and if they're injured, we feel bad. So it's sort of, it can go in all direction, but to try to figure out what is the essence of this individual that I live with, what is the essential needs for this person to be able to be who he or she really is, and do I have the capacity to give this individual that possibility? Perhaps I can't to the extent that I would really want to, but perhaps I can at least to some extent, and that would be good enough to at least have a good quality of life.
Yeah, I love it. How could you tips for people about how they can start communicating with their animals on an empathic way a bit? Could you talk us through any tips you've got for that?
Yeah, I think what we do as humans is that our brains are a beautiful machine, but not always smart. And it's very fast, and we tend to believe what our brains tells us to believe. So when we talk about that, we interpret the other one so quickly so that I can't actually hear what the other one has to say. I think this is our major problem. If my horse is fidgety, it makes me nervous. I don't want him to be fidgety. I don't spend time figuring out why. I just do something that will make it stop. And what if I wouldn't make that quick conclusion? What if I would just give myself some sort of stillness of just sitting and waiting and observing and seeing and feeling, so that my first reaction to the other one will pass, and the second and the third, until it's sort of quiet enough to feel what is actually happening here. I think we, as human beings, we feel good when we can fix things.
Yeah.
It's very hard for us to let things fix themselves, or to give the other one credit to be able to do more by themselves. That's also a way for us to show care, is to sort of do it for them. So I think we would need more time in just being, and try things in a sort of gentle way. What if I'm out hacking with my horse, and I decided that we're going to turn right up at the crossroads, and the horse wants to turn left. Well, if it is a possibility to go left, if I don't end up in someone's garden, well, perhaps we should try. Perhaps I should just follow the other one, start to follow the other one a little bit more than being so eager to make the other one follow me. Because we build our relationships so much through obedience.
Yes.
I feel that I'm being heard if the other one is doing what I tell him to do. Then I feel safe, and then I can relax, and then it's easier for me to dare to love someone that I know that I can control.
Yeah.
And which isn't really love, it's more a sense of security and comfort. And what if I would loosen up that obedient part? I mean, we often hear that if the animals would do whatever they want, they would take over the world and it would be chaos. But the only species that did take over the world was us, and it was chaos.
It is.
So,
I think we touched on this last time, and you made me laugh so much, Emelie. It's like, you know, what would, obviously, if your dog's running towards a main road, you've got to stop it because
yes,
it will get run over. So we're not talking about those situations. We're not
no,
talking about safety, just like you wouldn't let your child run towards a main road. But if you it's such a great point. When you're out for a walk, I see people not letting their dogs sniff at all. One thing we've got an issue, big issue here with my clients in America and Canada and the UK. I don't know if you come across this way with the work you do, Emelie. So with dogs now, obviously dogs bring so much joy to a household, and so many people have got dogs now. And particularly during the lockdown, a lot of people that have never had dogs before have now got dogs, which does unfortunately mean the rescue centres are also full.
Yeah, which was expected.
What we're finding is that a lot of people who've got dogs don't know how to have that communication, or what people would traditionally call training, that the dogs aren't socialized well. So they're not socializing well with each other when they come across people out on the heath or on other walks and things. Have you got any words of wisdom for that, about how people can try and get the balance right between, you know, where do people let their animals try and sort it out themselves, and where do they step in? Because it's a huge dilemma for the human.
It is. And I think it's also based on our thought system of hierarchy. We believe that we have to be the leader, and if we're not the leader, again, the great chaos will appear. And I think we need to shift that focus, because what they seem to look for in us is that we know our capacity in the whole. What is my precise point of responsibility in this situation, and what is your precise point of responsibility? And with dogs, I think that is quite clear. They're in smaller packs, because that depends on how they catch their prey.
Yeah.
It can't be 100 dogs. They wouldn't be able to survive like that. They survive in smaller groups, and within those smaller groups, it's very clear who is doing what. And we look at that and decide that there is a hierarchy. Now, lots of scientists, especially around wolves, have taken that away, but it's hard for us to take it away culturally, so we still have that. So almost every dog owner I meet in my work that has any kind of issue with their dog has been diagnosed as a bad leader.
Yeah.
And they feel very bad about that. So they try to be good leaders, but it goes against their inner sense of who they are to become dominant. And then they're stuck. The dog is not really looking for the person to be dominant. That could be very confusing. They're looking for the person to be trustworthy. And we become trustworthy when we genuinely, truly believe that we're capable.
Yeah.
So if I'm out with my dog and I see another one with a dog coming towards me and I don't feel capable, then the responsibility becomes the dog's responsibility. No technique in the world can change this fact. If we don't feel capable, the dog is responsible for solving the situation. And if I have taught the dog that you're not capable, or if the dog has never practiced the situation, of course, the dog doesn't feel capable. So we're now in hysterics, both of us. And at the same time, we're terrified of being judged by the other dog owner, who now can clearly see that I'm in lack of control over my dog, and I probably shouldn't even have a dog, which starts all my emotions, because I'm terrified of having to separate from my dog, which maybe I have to do if I can't control the situation. So now nobody is capable. So I think we should just switch the leadership part to how do I feel capable in that situation? Well, we need to practice. We have to practice. There is no shortcut to having that sense of security, and then admit to the dog, okay, now I'm hysteric again, and terrified that we won't be able to make it. How could I visualize this differently? What would I wish in this situation? What is my dream scenario when we pass this other dog? Well, perhaps it is that it doesn't become as much. We just walk past and it's not a big deal. Well, if that's what you wish for, then that's what you will have to practice.
Yes.
You probably have to practice it by the time you put on the leash before you've opened the front door. Because already then, when you're taking your shoes off, already when you look at the watch to see if it's time to go out, you're probably hoping that that neighbor is not going to come around the corner, because then what do you do?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're all set for this situation that you can't control and that you're totally incapable of handling. And the dog is like, okay, the focus on this walk is this panic situation that I have to fix, but I shouldn't fix it, because then that becomes a problem. So I think instead of trying to correct the animal all the time, we need to see what am I radiating here? What am I sending off to this situation? Because being a leader is an irrelevant word. It's like, are you capable in this particular situation or are you not?
Yes.
And this is the animal's question.
That's
And you have to answer honestly, because you can't pretend. I mean, I started to ride in a riding school, and one of the first things you teach the children is don't show the horse that you're scared. It's hopeless. I mean, you smell of adrenaline and you're obviously terrified, and at the same time you pretend that you're not. What is the poor horse supposed to do with this?
Yeah, it just teaches them that your communication is false and that they can't trust it. I mean, I laugh all the time. I'm laughing because I've got a little Shetland pony. He's about 35 now. And when I take him out with
Love them.
Romeo, my others, everyone's on their big horses and they're coming up to me. And before I can even get near them, they're like, oh, my horse is terrified of Shetlands. So it's not setting off on a good thing. And then when they go, they're saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And the horse is just plodding past and the owner's terrified. But I do laugh because I think probably my Shetland says something really rude to the great big horses.
It probably does. Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot of communication going on there that we're not aware of, but it is interesting. But I also recognize myself in situations where, you sort of think and you try and make yourself capable, but you're right, it's the practice. And we humans are the experts at wanting everything to be a quick fix, whether it's our medical conditions with a pill or our bank account without doing any work, or situation control without practice. And you don't get anywhere in anything to get really good at it without practicing it.
No, it's true. And also, I mean, we could talk to each other since so many of us experience this.
Yes.
So, I mean, these riders could say, is it possible that we would come and just hang out with your Shetland pony for a few hours? Because that would probably the practice we need.
Exactly.
Or you actually talk to this person that comes. Perhaps it's an angry, grumpy guy and it's impossible, but you haven't really tried.
Yeah.
And I'm totally embarrassed. This happens every time we meet. And is it possible that we could just walk next to each other for whatever? Could we meet and do a walk together sometime next week? Is it possible that we could try to solve this? Because I am ashamed. It's better to
I
be
love
honest about it.
Yeah, I really, really love it. I think, this is the thing is, it's like the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and getting different results. So, yeah, so in terms of asking your animals questions is so important, isn't it, Emelie? For anyone that's sharing their life with animals, what sort of questions can they be asking them?
Well, I think it's still the finding out who they really are. I still think that is the basic, most important question, because it never ends. It's like if you find the essence of someone, that is a dynamics that will always be interesting and lead you forward. Instead of sort of wanting to find out what do you want, do you like this food, do you like that saddle? Sometimes it's important to know if things are fitting or working. But that slightly deeper question in who are you and who am I to you?
Yeah,
It's and allow some time for that answer to emerge, because it doesn't necessarily come as an intellectual insight or an image. It could come as an emotion or a feeling or a state of being that you might not immediately connect to that conversation.
yes. Oh, that's just so lovely. And imagine if we all as human to human asked each other that and took the time to listen, how much conflict could be avoided.
Yeah, and also if we are being seen for who we really are inside, then judgment disappears on that level, because it can't coexist with that. And also the creative solutions to problems becomes more available too, because it's like, okay, if I understand who you are, then I understand much better why you react so strongly when it's windy, or why it's so hard for this dog to be patted on the head, for example. Then I don't need to technically try to understand that, because I know who you are, so I understand how that feels for you. So that question still brings all the details within it in a way. And by being seen for who you are and allowing the other one to do that to you, then you don't really need much else. So all the things that you feel that this has to work, otherwise I can't keep the animal. But is that really true?
Yeah.
Perhaps you can still be together in a slightly different way than what you first expected, or with different values than what you have exactly now.
Yes.
Sometimes you do have to separate a human from an animal because they're just not a good match, no matter
Yeah.
how hard they try. But in a lot of cases, you could just slightly change your expectation of the situation and maybe find a much better quality of life than
Yeah.
what you think. I often, when I meet deep relationships with humans and animals, you often hear, well, I never planned on having a black gelding. I was looking for a chestnut mare, and then he turned up out of nowhere, and that is just the best match. They've sidelined what they just went against their expectations, and allowed this relationship to come in. I bet you hear that a lot too.
Oh, loads. And it just makes me laugh so much. I mean, it's because when people, it's so funny from an animal's point of view. We talked briefly last time about cats, and we talk about love, but most cats are the expert at self-love, because I've never met a cat
Yes.
that's perfect. And actually, I've never met a cat that I don't think is perfect. So, I think if people want to, learn about how to love themselves, if you're not lucky enough to share your life with a cat, go and find one of your friends and just spend some time with it.
Yeah.
And it will teach you a lot of good stuff. Now, I'm very conscious of the time, and I know what a busy lady you are. I really want you to tell everyone about the work that you're doing. So when we last spoke, you had this challenge that the land was being put up to sale. So could you update us on where you're at with your sanctuary, where you're at with the school, and how people can connect with you, and if you offer opportunities to work with you?
Yes, what had happened the last time, and the reason why I then became available to the world, or the sanctuary did, was because, I mean, it all started in a very small scale, on this tiny farm where I live, and that really isn't enough for 70 horses, especially not for grazing lands. So it means that we have lots of leases for grazing in the area around, and the biggest one of those went up for sale at the same time as we lost the second biggest one to a solar park. And that meant that half of our grazing areas disappeared within a couple of weeks, and we wouldn't be able to continue. So that was panic, and I was totally devastated, actually. And then some of the students and colleagues and friends and people who helped said that, well, why don't we try to find the money? Well, the money in this case was like 9 million Swedish crowns, which is like 850,000 euros, which is a lot of money. And we needed to come up with that within 3 months.
Wow.
Which I never thought was going to be possible. And it was possible.
Wow.
We actually managed to raise the funds to buy this whole farm. And that farm that has the biggest grazing areas doesn't only have grazing areas. It's part of a mountainside. It's a lake area. It's some wetlands, and we begin to realize that, well, it started off with a panic over grazing, but it's probably about something much bigger than that. It's probably about allowing all these different species to tell their story and try to figure out how can we recreate a balance between these living species that we have destroyed.
Yeah.
This farm has been traditionally farmed with good intent and loving, caring people for generations. But they have cut down forests, and they have done what we are taught to do. And how can we, now with access to this land and the ability to give the species their voice back, try to recreate? Because there are so many, I'm sure it's the same in England, plants, insects, all sorts of species are disappearing because of the way we farm the land.
Yes.
In Sweden, for example, meadows are almost completely disappearing because the way we cut hay is different from the way we used to do it.
Yeah. Which of course has a huge impact on the animal's health who's eating the hay, and the cycle goes on. Yeah.
So everything is like falling apart. And what can we actually do? And what can we learn in the process of trying to recreate these environments? Because now our story is known, and it means that it can inspire other people. So we are now also we are finding a way to cooperate with a guy who is totally focused on recreating meadows, and he wants to have his office on that farm. And can we make some of the grazing area not traditionally grazed anymore, but turning it into meadows, meaning that we will cut the hay later and let the animals come on later, and so on. And
amazing.
And they graze in the forest areas, because as meadows are disappearing, so are the glens and openings in the forest. Because when we plant trees in rows and only the same age and type, we kill every other species that would have lived in that area, basically. And Sweden is full of what we call energy efficient forests, meaning that we plant them in order to cut them down.
Yes.
Which is so respectless that I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
But that's what we do, because we're taught to do that. So we have all these different projects, and this is very long term, and we're trying to we're turning the non-profit organization that could raise all the funds to turn that into a foundation. Legally, that is a better system to protect the land.
Beautiful.
So
Do you have, with the Friends of Mio, do you still have students that come and work and help out? And
Yes, what we discussed it today actually, is that we have many different ways in also now for people who are not Swedish speaking. Because on this farm, there is also a house, an old farmhouse, where people can sleep and stay, which means that we can take in volunteer workers for different periods of time. And we're trying to figure that out because this is all new to us, but it will definitely be, we had one Canadian lady staying for 3 weeks, which worked out perfectly. So we know it's possible, and we can do more of that because we do need a lot of help.
yes,
in all sorts of areas. So
Yeah.
so it's not that you have to be skilled in anything particular. We can surely find something to do for anyone.
yes,
And then this year we are trying out 2 international classes. They're 10 days each, or 8 days with 2 days coming and going. One in May and one in September, and they're filling up. The May one is full, and I think the September one is full at this stage, but I will check that out. Which means that we're making a sort of intense course of what we do in our school, because if people travel far, they need to stay for long enough so it's worth the traveling. And if you
yes,
travel far, you need time to just settle, and you can't come and go.
yeah.
Also environmentally crazy to travel more than necessary. So but we're opening up for international students, and we have a ground regeneration course with one of the horses that is online.
Brilliant.
And we are putting together online material in English, so it would also be possible to do online courses.
Amazing.
So all of that is happening, and we do have a system that people can give money to the sanctuary to maintain the animals and help paying for food, and in turn they get a newsletter which deeply describes all these philosophical conversations with other species. And up until now, that's only been in Swedish, but now we're making all of that under the umbrella of Friends of Mio and translating them into English. So it means that if you want to take part of the work and read more about it and help with funding some of the food, it's whatever you would pay is up to you. There is no fixed sum. Then that's possible too. So there are many ways now to become part of this community.
That's absolutely fantastic. And obviously, anyone watching this on whatever platform you're watching it, all the links will be in the show notes below. And do you still do individual work with people?
Yes, I do.
Yes, so people can book you for individual. So you'll make sure I've got the link for how people
Yeah.
can contact you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
I can't recommend that strongly enough. Absolutely fantastic. Oh, it's just such a pleasure to find out what you're up to and find out just how relevant this is to so many people are searching for their purpose. They know there's a different way to do things, but they're not quite sure how.
Exactly. That's exactly how
it's so much easier for people to accept ideas coming from an animal than it might be from another human.
Yeah. Again, because we don't feel so cornered or challenged or judged.
Absolutely, because there is
do to each other still.
Oh, it's just absolutely fantastic. So is there anything else that you want to tell us before we finish this one off?
No, I don't know, but I think it's just the importance of sharing, because I meet so many people that sit with their own animal or in their own place, and they feel very alone in these thoughts, because the norm can still be quite harsh. And to know that they're not alone. It's actually people all over this planet is looking for possibilities to create a more compassionate, empathic world. There is lots of hope in that, actually. It's not so much more is happening than what we think, actually.
I so agree. And, the animals haven't given up on us, so we shouldn't be giving up on ourselves, and perhaps showing ourselves as a species a little bit more compassion and listening to ourselves more will be a great place to start. Thank you so much, Emelie. I could literally talk to you all day. It's such a fascinating conversation, and I'm really excited to see what the animals have got to share with us. So please do come back and share more with us, and all the links for how you can connect, support, learn from all the offers that Emelie's spoken about will all be below, including the links for how you can purchase her books as well. Thank you so much, Emelie, and thank you so much to the animals.
Thank you.